So welcome to the OpenJS Cross Project Council meeting for November 9th, 2021. We got a little bit of a late start. Sorry for any of those who are waiting on the stream to start to watch this time. We will follow the issue that was opened for this meeting in the repo, which was issue number 810. Before we get started, any announcements that people want to share?
Super quick, there's an OpenJS World Programming Committee meeting this Thursday. It's on the public calendar. We'd love to have you. Feel free to pop in if you want to get involved in planning the event.
Node.js 17.1.0 released as of like 20 minutes ago.
Woo!
Or 17. Which one was it?
17.1.0.
Okay. Sounds good. Any other announcements?
Just one quick update. We're updating the Node.js certification to V16 long-term support, going from 14 to 16. And we have a blog that'll go out today. We're just doing some final testing. So.
Sounds good. Anything else? If not, then we can move on to the next topic, which is any updates from the board meeting. I'm just trying to think if anything comes up. I think the main thing that comes to mind with me is we had a good discussion about some of the technical strategy work that we've been working on. Jory put together a nice summary of that. And the board seemed quite supportive of helping to, move that forward and in terms of being important in terms of, how we message our overall strategy for what we're doing. I don't know, Sarah or Robin, you want to add anything to that?
Just that we spent some time looking at budget for next year. We're doing well. Many foundations are, have struggled just a tiny bit during the pandemic, but we've held pretty strong and just a little bit over flat. So was really, I think, good news for us given all the challenges of the pandemic. So we're in a good spot.
We also it was our first board meeting with our 3 new board reps too, which was very exciting. So.
Okay, if that's it on the board front, we could move on to the next agenda item, which the first one is start listing documents maintained by the CPC, which is 789. I think, Toby, you'd open that. Just trying to take a look.
I was supposed to do work, and let's say that the last 2 weeks have been a bit complicated, and so I haven't.
Okay, so no update on that one. The next one is clarify requirements around COC violation.
And I think this is the same too.
I have an update just sort of more broadly about code of conduct and then where we are with sort of our inventory. So okay. I'll talk about the inventory later. I did go through all of our projects to take a look at that. And pretty good spot there, and we can talk about it. But last week was the Linux Foundation open source member summit for LF members. And I attended, there were 2 breakout sessions on code of conduct that were a packed house, which was pretty amazing. And there was sort of a separate kind of ad hoc working group that got together to talk to sort of follow up on that. So I believe those sessions are public. One's by Joanna Lee, who's an attorney, who's one of our attorneys as well. She's fantastic. It's an area specialty. And the other was Ava Black, who's on the Kubernetes Code of Conduct Committee and at Microsoft. So I'll find those links and we can put them in the notes. But I learned a lot. And if I was sort of looking at what we're looking at is having some of those core requirements. Toby has a checklist in the issue. I think those are really good. And I think, and I'm not quite sure that we have sort of codified those. It's not entirely, I'm not entirely sure. And I think the biggest one that is in Toby's list that's maybe not in our policy is to err on the side of transparency and to always list who is on that code of conduct committee. Many of our projects have, they'll say they have a code of conduct committee, they'll have a reporting email, but you really don't know who is on that committee. So I think clarifying that would be an important step for us. And then looking sort of in the future, you'll see probably some folks, Ava and others, spin up a new repo on a code of conduct. And there's kind of some sort of 5 points that I think they're working on. One is the whole notion of reducing your personal liability when you serve on a code of conduct committee. And I guess there's been threats of lawsuits in the past. And if you're on if you're in a volunteer position, how are you protected? So this group is looking at creating sort of more kind of what's the line when you escalate to an attorney into an area where you are better counseled and protected in that escalation process. The other thing that they'll be working through is when do you centralize versus decentralize code of conduct issues. A third is training. This is something I know Jory has brought up quite a bit. We don't mandate training. So how do we get that training in place? How can the Linux Foundation support that, fund that as well? And again, if there is new work around a new code of conduct, where should that be hosted? Probably not at the Linux Foundation because it impacts people who work across foundations from Apache, Eclipse, and everywhere else. So this group wants it to be broad. And then just making sure that there are diverse voices on these projects. So if that's something you're interested in participating in, I can plug you into that group. So that is just work that's sort of spinning up. Okay, quickly, I did an inventory. And if I sort of take a look, we have 38 projects. Really only 5 do not have their code of conduct listed on their website or their GitHub repo that I found. So I don't want to call anybody out because it could be buried and I didn't find it, but we'll work with those folks. I found 10 that were just great, like best practices, pretty awesome. And then the rest, honestly, were just like little minor tweaks, dead links, no process. And I think we talked about if you don't have a process, then do you really have a code of conduct and things like that. So one of the things I think we need to do is just make sure that we're really solid on what the process is, who's on these committees and what guidance can we give and what templates can we give to these projects. I think some of the projects who have more work to do, we're probably still in that onboarding process from the JS Foundation to OpenJS Foundation. So for example, they didn't adopt our OpenJS code of conduct. So it links to a variety of places and things like that. So that's where we are. So questions?
My quick question would be, is there any way that like having gone through the process of sort of looking at them where we could automate any of that so that, it's a regular scan that says, yeah, okay, we've got things in place that that may be hard, but I thought I'd ask anyway.
They're often buried, those code of conducts. I love it when it's right in the top right hand of the GitHub repo where you usually have your license. Love it when it's there, super easy to find. Sometimes it's buried in the contributing section. Toby, you had a question?
Yeah, no, comment, just like we said, like no process, do we really have a code of conduct? Like if the link is buried somewhere, like, do we really have a code of conduct? I think those are important. It's not just like cosmetic, right? When you actually when there's a crisis, being able to find this easily is it should be so I think that's important. So maybe having some recommendations around this would be useful. But yeah, thanks for sharing this and thanks for reporting from the Linux Foundation Summit. I think this was really useful information to have, and it's great to know that there's ongoing work in this space.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I wonder
automating. I think putting together some best practices for them to adopt. I love it when they have it on their website as well as their GitHub repo. Again, so I have several notes for each. I don't think it can be something. I do think that we can scale it in a way, but again, we can work with them individually as well. make sure they get in the right spot.
Because I do wonder, like, how big an ask is it to say we want, you know, we could say like you need to have a file named this in your repo, right? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I guess that's for the discussion of the in that issue there, we can flesh out what the ask, the ask beyond what we've already asked would be.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd love some feedback from some of those projects on how difficult would it be to add more. But again, I think many of them are just some minor fixes, but making it so it's not buried, I think is the best thing they could do if somebody's stressed and wanting to file a report. So, and then again, I think, you know, if we all agree that this should be, again, having names, I think it's really great, because if you're reporting you don't know who this list is going to, the person who, you know, you're reporting a complaint against may be in that group and you don't know it. So how is that handled? It's important. Toby?
Yeah, and just to your point, Michael, I think more than actually trying to automate the thing, making sure that it's part of the onboarding process, that like whatever process we want for this is actually implemented there, would be already like a really huge first step. I mean, we have just a requirement for having one, but I think like having a requirement for the process, like a larger package here, I think is probably like a good step. And that, like, that's not something that we have to check all the time. It's something that we do once, right?
Yeah. Documentation is I think lacking, not just for us, I think, but I heard that across at the Linux Foundation meeting that we had. Folks we're all just really missing documentation, and hopefully that would become sort of a best practices that we could adopt. We're just not there yet. So I'm happy to draft something up with your all's help. So.
Okay, anybody other thoughts before we move on to the next issue? I don't see any, so let's move on to the next one. The next one is create proposal for the community fund. That's 756. I think I remember it was Robin or Jory, you were going to look at some options for the thank you program.
I did. I came up with some options. We use Pinnacle branding for our swag, essentially. They have great negotiated rates for content and most importantly, shipping, which is huge, right? As well, for especially what we're looking at. We worked just as a team, and we had sort of our three favorites, and then Pinnacle is looking for some other suggestions. But, you know, backing up, I think we need to think about budget. So let me tell you what sort of our suggestions and what I think it would take to sort of do a thank you program from a budget perspective. We love the power bricks. Those are always popular. Water bottles and fleece blankets. Those seem to be sort of the more popular ones. Those range in the $10 to $20 range. Pinnacle's going back to find us a really good quality. I didn't want this to be like crap that that's like broadly handed out. That's, I want it to be high quality for a thank you gift. So they're coming back with some recommendations for that. If you ever have any other favorite swag, let us know. And there's sort of two ways you can do it. You could give somebody a thank you. We could set up a store, an OpenJS Foundation store with our product. You could give them a free gift certificate for that particular item. They could click it, it would get drop shipped to them. Or we can just notify Pinnacle, hey, we want to recognize these 5 people this month or this quarter, and we could send those names to Pinnacle and they would drop ship it. So it could be something that we can control, or it could be something that the recipient controls. The international shipping was a big question I had. We have a very global audience. They have a partnership with a global shipping company. So if you were to look at FedEx and UPS, you would not look at those numbers. So a shipping range, and of course it depends on size and weight, could range from $12 to $40 per item internationally, which is actually pretty good if you've shipped internationally. So I had in my mind, if we were going to buy in bulk, to buy like 500 of something. And say you bought 500 of something and it's, $10 to $15 a piece. You need to add 10 to that at least, or 12 to 20 for that for international shipping. So I would think we would need about $10,000 to kick off a thank you program. But I think the nice thing is once we set up the store as well, we could also buy smaller items and use that for supporting meetups around the world too, which is something that they have done. Like, here's $100, here, download your stickers and we'll ship them to you as well. So once we sort of get that store set up, we can do that. So it's really, it's the budget ask, and I think it's quantity too,
Did we, I seem to remember there was work on a store in the past. Is that?
There is, I found an old link. They're doing an inventory on what was left behind. So I'm getting that information. Yeah.
We think those were mostly node items as well. So
Yeah, it was
not
probably
necess-
the node
Yeah.
related stuff,
Yeah.
but
Yep. So, Pinnacle shared with me that old store link. And so she's doing an inventory of all the node product. There's a few random JavaScript products as well.
and I guess when you say buy 500, that has to be like 500 with the logo on it or the same one?
Yeah,
or
and I
how does
think
that all work?
Just to scale, I think this is the hard part. We're going to, to bring your prices down, you'll want to buy in bulk, right? So that makes it harder to buy per project. So the idea is it would be OpenJS swag, unless, yeah.
And there were a few suggestions of like supporting like a donation to a charity or a gift card. How did that didn't fit? Or I'm just wondering.
No, I think it's a great idea. I have seen a lot of happy recipients receiving GitHub swag on Twitter lately. So I don't know.
But is that something they can support or the store can support or?
I think what we would want to do is maybe establish a partnership with one or two entities to make it meaningful, probably.
Something to consider as well that may be much more difficult is the best GitHub swag I've ever seen is skyline.github.com, where it takes your contribution graph and lets you 3D print an example of it, seen here. And so that's unique to me, and I can do one for each year and so on. So I wonder if there's something around to be explored around customized swag that highlights an individual's contributions to foundation projects.
Yeah, and that's code specific, which is one unique issue. I think for
That's
us,
true.
Yeah, I think for us,
Well, actually, no. GitHub's contributions include PR reviews, documentation, it includes a lot more stuff than just code. But you're right; it could easily be code focused, and that would not be ideal.
I think my challenge is we are a very small team, and our budget is not huge, and we have 38 projects, and we would want to make it available to everybody. So we could, if you have we could change it up and make it like the superstar MVPs. And make it more special. Yeah, I mean, Jory and I were looking at, and I had suggested maybe some glass bricks, or something like that to really recognize those special people. We could definitely do something like that, or more custom. So I guess it's recognition, but I think it's also to encourage them to do more, right? So.
Any other, I guess we can continue to discuss this because we only have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I'll come back with more specific numbers, and then I think maybe that will help guide decisions. Jordan, I'm going to go back to Pinnacle and ask for more of those customized ideas as well. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and it would be if you can maybe put it in an issue that people can read and comment
Yep.
on and stuff like that.
Okay.
That would be great.
I'll do it. Yeah. Do it.
Okay, thanks for that update. So then the last one on the agenda, which is provide implementation guidance for the DCO CLA. We don't have Brian this week, or Brian had to leave early, so I don't know, Robin or Jory had any updates on that one.
So what we can update is that on the DCO Probot app, there have been a lot of conversations across multiple projects within the LF, and there is increasing appetite now to potentially have LFIT take that project on. So for a minute, I thought it was dead in the water, but I will say that I think that after particularly some folks in Hyperledger and some other bigger projects were like, no, this is really important to us. I think that those conversations are advancing, and it looks like we might be able to support that, not just as OpenJS Foundation, but as like the LF. So
Okay.
that's the status.
Okay, well, that's a good update to hear that's looking up. So that would be definitely good. So that takes us to the end of the agenda, and we have 3 minutes left. Is there anything else that we should talk about before we close out for today?
With our final 3 minutes, let me just say one of the things in the OpenJS World programming group right now that we're talking a lot about is, who should we potentially be telling in advance? Hey, there's our event is the week of June 6th. We'd love for you to either consider, submitting a CFP. Obviously the CFP will be open in the new year, or B, these are folks that we'd love to potentially think about for keynotes. So at this point in time, if you've seen presentations from folks, particularly those that we don't see all the time, we'd love to get your feedback on who you think would be great for either our JS keynote day or the shared keynote day. We'd love to know what you think.
Okay, and I guess with that, let's close out. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.